This is Doug DeMuro, and today we are going to cover the age-old topic, should you buy a cheap used luxury car? Very good question. This is a major topic for car enthusiasts who see these old luxury or performance cars kind of aging and they're like, that looks affordable. And this hits everybody eventually goes through this, should I or shouldn't I do this? And I get this question all the time. And the cars are so appealing, used S-Classes or 7 Series or Ferraris or Porsches, whatever it is. They eventually become worth kind of pennies on the dollar. And so obviously the fear is maintenance and reliability. And so the question is, should you do it even with that fear in the back of your mind? Let's get to it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this wonderful Porsche 944 Turbo, which sold for $54,000, this Dodge Viper, which sold for just under $43,000 after failing to meet its reserve with our biggest competitor, and this wonderful BMW M3 Lime Rock Park Edition, which sold for $95,600, setting a record price for this model. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. Check it out at carsandbids.com. Okay, so let's get right into this. Should you buy a used luxury performance car? In my view, the quick answer to the question is that it depends, which isn't really a quick answer, but it is the answer. And it depends on a few things. Now, a few car people, YouTube car mechanics, for instance, especially if they're really focused on reliability and like Toyotas, they will say, absolutely not. You should never do this. It's a terrible idea, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to do. It's too expensive. These cars will be expensive to own, to repair, to fix, to operate. And I respect that. I think that there is a rational, like financially sensible point of view there. There really is. And I think that makes some sense. And I think if you find yourself kind of going towards that world, and especially if you're not really that into cars, there's no point in spending money and taking a risk on a used performance or luxury car. I get that. But I have a slightly different opinion because I have a slightly different enthusiasm direction with my cars, and so here's my take. Okay, first and foremost, most used luxury cars are going to be pretty expensive to own, to maintain, to operate, to repair when they break, and probably they'll be more expensive than just about any other car in existence, frankly. A used Rolls Royce, you can buy one for 25 grand or 15 grand. You're like, wow, that's pretty cool. But that is just the beginning. These are expensive cars. Often they were made by hand using parts that are difficult to source. It's not like a Honda or Toyota where you can easily find a part. So you have to buy one of these cars expecting to spend a lot of money on repairs. But you can do this successfully and you can make it make some financial sense, but there's two important things that you have to keep in mind if you plan to do this. Now, it is worth noting, and this is a point I want to make early in the video, but it's not the only point I want to make in this video. Cars that are reliable tend to be newer cars that have a lot of depreciation to do. So I constantly will hear people say, oh, well, I didn't want to buy some special cool used car because it was going to break all the time. So instead I went out and I bought a new Toyota minivan or what, I don't know, as an example, but you get my point. Well, okay. But in a normal market, not today's market, but a normal market, a Toyota minivan, it costs $45,000 and in 5 years it'll be worth $25,000. Is the performance or special car you are going to buy really going to lose $20,000 to repairs and maintenance in that same amount of time? And so it's important to keep in mind that some of the people who advocate, oh, forget used cars, forget performance cars, European, they're not necessarily making a better decision. It's just that they don't see the money going to the repair guy, to the mechanic. They spend the money and then in 10 years they sell the car, 6 years or 5 years, whatever, and then they buy another one. But what they haven't seen is depreciation, which can also be incredibly expensive. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Yes, these used performance luxury cars will cost you a lot in repairs, but depreciation is also costly. And people who pretend like they're doing the right thing by going and buying a brand new whatever, it's not always, usually they justify it with financial reasons. It's not always a great financial investment. However, Neither is a lot of used luxury cars, if we're being totally honest. But I maintain that you can still do it successfully. But there are two important things to keep in mind if you want to try to do this successfully, both for your sanity and for your finances. And number one, maybe most important, you have to set aside money to pay for what will be inevitable car repairs. You just have to know if you're buying an old Audi or a 7 Series, it's gonna have problems, and you have to put money aside for when these problems inevitably crop up. Now the good news is, like I said, in a lot of these cars, you don't have to deal with much depreciation. If you're buying a car that's 8, 10 years old, that's already taken care of for you. But instead, you're gonna get hit from a reliability perspective. And so keep money put away for that. Instead of losing money to the depreciation fairy, you're still gonna lose money. Have it set aside. Now, I have a friend who desperately wants to own a Ferrari F355, and he could buy one. He could purchase one. But he knows that they are troublesome and problematic cars, and he is waiting until he has enough money to comfortably afford to own the car and not just to buy the car. There's a difference with European old performance luxury cars. There's a difference between buying and owning. You buy something, you have it. You own it, then you're maintaining it. You're paying for its continued existence. And that's a different situation. And this is a crucial point. If you do want to do this, if you want to buy a used luxury car, you have to put away money because you know that problems will come. You cannot buy one of these on a shoestring budget when you're living paycheck to paycheck. You will eventually get screwed, especially if you're daily driving it. Because if you don't, what happens is these cars end up as deferred maintenance. This is how used performance and luxury cars become so expensive to own, because people kick the can down the road. They can't afford this, they can't afford that when it's a preventative item, and then it breaks and becomes even more expensive. And that is a mistake, and it causes problems, and you don't want to get into that situation. So you have to have money set aside. The truth is, from a financial perspective, you can own just about anything if you can pay for the maintenance costs. People say, I would never buy a Bugatti Veyron, it's so expensive to own. Well, if you were a billionaire, it wouldn't matter. You could put aside the money and be fine. No car is off limits if you can afford to set aside the money. And affording to set aside the money is the key here. It's not just like, oh, it's an emergency fund, $200, and I hope nothing happens. You have to have the money set aside to do it right and to maintain the car properly. Otherwise, you could find yourself in serious trouble fast. Now, I want to say another quick point. This is my number 2, very, very important point if you want to go buy a used performance luxury car, whatever, known for its unreliability, and that is know which ones to buy. This is an interesting topic. There are some enthusiasts who are not very well informed and who don't understand nuance, who will tell you that all used European cars, all BMWs, all Mercedes are unreliable and expensive to own. People say that every time I post a picture of my G-Wagon, which I find to be very funny because that car is known in G-Wagon circles, in enthusiast SUV circles, to be incredibly reliable. My G-Wagon has the famous M113 V8. That engine never dies. And my G-Wagon is older than modern ones, doesn't have a lot of tech, whatever. Every time I post, people say, oh, did it break down again? No. It doesn't break down. But you have to know, and people who are not very well informed, they just assume that all cars from that era are unreliable, but they aren't. And so you have to do research. From a Mercedes perspective, I know that AMG and regular Mercedes models, the 90s and early 2000s with the M113 V8 are reliable, unless they have active body control, which can be expensive. And that's the kind of thing that I know because I know old Mercedes. But there's stuff out here about all performance cars. There are certain years that were better than others. There are certain engines that are better than others, transmissions, body styles. You can figure all of that stuff out if you do enough research. Go on forums, go on Facebook groups, watch videos. There's a lot of information out there. If you really want a used 7 Series, don't just go buy one. Do your research or else it will bite you. I am on a Range Rover owners Facebook group. And for the L322 Range Rover, I had this older one. And a guy comes in and he says, hey, I just bought this Range Rover last week and it's making a ticking noise, the back of the engine. And those of us who have done research and who know that means the timing chains are going. And he'll have to replace the chains or the engine. It's either going to be $6,000 or $12,000. I mean, it's an incredibly expensive repair job. And he should have known he should have done the research to know what years were the timing chains affected, what models were affected, and what does a ticking sound from the engine mean before he bought it. And someone replied to him and said, one of my all-time favorite lines that I use all the time now, being stupid costs money. People think they'll get bailed out. Oh, I made this decision. Can someone help me? No, like I did research and I don't have problems like that. You should too. The research is available to all of us, but if you're gonna not do the research, and if you're gonna be stupid, it's gonna cost money. Welcome to life, and that's true of these Range Rovers, and it's true of any used performance car. So, make the smartest decision you can. Do not go out and buy some car just because it looks cool on the dealership lot. Research the years, research the transmissions, research the engines, the powertrains, and pick one that won't bankrupt you. That's the smartest thing that you can do. But in general, overarching, the big answer here is if you cannot afford to set the money aside, don't do it. I would really love to have a Countach. That would be really cool. And I think I could buy one, but I don't think that I could, based on my understanding of these things, I don't think I could afford, given what I would rather allocate money to, the costs of repairs and maintenance and keeping that car going, especially if I wanted to drive it as much as I drive this car almost daily. I think that would run into some issues with the Countach. That is financial prudence, and that's what you need to do if you want to get a car like this. Now, some would say that real financial prudence, cautiousness, is not buying a car like this at all. But they're wrong. I mean, the truth is, if this is something you really, really want, and this is where your priorities lie, and you're not spending money on other frivolous stuff, and clothes and watches and alcohol, whatever it is, if you ignore all that because this is the thing you're saving for, you can make it happen, but you have to be able to put away the money and comfortably afford it. And if you can't, frankly, I think you should seek alternatives, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice here. If you want a BMW 7 Series, but you're worried about some of the problems that car had, look at a Lexus LS. It was a similar type of experience. If you want a Range Rover, but you're worried about the problems that car had, a Toyota Land Cruiser, Lexus LX, Infiniti QX80. These cars are out there. They are more reliable. I get that it's not the same thing, but if you can't afford the same thing, then you can't afford the same thing. And you should seek alternatives because there are other options. And you don't really want to bankrupt yourself for a car. No car is worth it. It just isn't. So there you go. Yes, you can buy a used luxury performance car. It is possible and it is doable. And no, they are not all bad. If you do good research and you buy a good one, you can find a good one and it won't cost you an enormous amount of money. But you have to set money aside. You have to be honest with yourself about what it's going to cost and how the financial picture is going to look. You have to be reasonable and rational, or else you can't do it. If you're buying it purely based on emotions and you just see a cool looking one, it is not how you want to buy a car like that. You want to put a lot of effort and thought into it. And if you can't afford to do that, well, then seek alternatives. Look at other options that maybe are a little bit more reliable that give you most of what you want. That's my advice on whether you should buy a cheap used luxury car.